Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Russell here, and with pandemic supports like the Canada Recovery Benefit, the Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit, as well as business supports like the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy, all set to end by the end of this month, the pressure is on for the government to decide whether or not they're going to extend this or not. And now historically, when it's come to these times when there's been a potential for an extension, it's been largely pushed on by opposition parties in the House of Commons like the NDP. But up until now, we hadn't gotten the NDP's policy on whether or not they'd like to see these businesses or these supports and these benefits extended into the future or not, and what exactly their plan was to force the government or at least pressure them to do so. And that is until now, because Jagmeet Singh just put out a press conference that's going to make this a lot more clear, and it does put a lot more pressure on Justin Trudeau and the Liberals to extend these supports, but not in the exact way you might think. So in today's video, we're going to break down all of what Jagmeet Singh said here about each of these individual benefits, and there is a little bit in here also about a GIS clawback, a problem that many seniors have been facing who have received these benefits. So we're going to get into all of that in today's video, but before we do, make sure to subscribe to the channel to keep supporting Canadian content right here on the YouTube platform, and check out all of those links in the description that support the channel whenever you click on them and use them. So with that said, let's dive right in. I'm going to show you a little bit of this press conference and then we'll break it down. Jagmeet Singh does specifically mention the CRB, but this first thing that he comments on is what I mentioned just prior, the GIS clawback for many low-income seniors. If you don't already know, the GIS is a support that helps many low-income seniors make ends meet, but unfortunately, many of these seniors who claimed pandemic benefits showed a higher income this year, and as a result, their GIS was clawed back or greatly reduced because of the higher income level that they showed because of receiving these pandemic benefits that they were entitled to. Let me show you what he has to say on this.
The broad strokes, things that I want to see, but some real immediate steps, because there are immediate steps we can see right now. In addition to some of the ones I laid out, another immediate step. Right now, there are seniors that receive GIS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, who are having their GIS clawed back right now. These are some of the most vulnerable seniors. There is a minor change that would mean that these seniors, who are amongst the most economically desperate, would no longer have their GIS clawed back. And just to put that into context, having their GIS clawed back means that some of these seniors might end up on the streets. Some of our elders might not be able to afford the homes that they live in, their apartments that they live in. They will not afford them if they lose their GIS. That's another concrete step that Liberals can take. So I want to see movement right now immediately on paid sick leave. I want to see movement on stopping the clawback for these seniors so that they can actually live in dignity. I want to see immediate steps to stop fighting Indigenous kids in court. These are some immediate things that the government can do if they want to show that they're really interested in working for people. And if they do that, they can count on my support.
So this clip sets the tone for the rest of this press conference. It is in its entirety Jagmeet Singh saying, hey, Liberals, this is exactly what we want you to do, and we will support you if you make these changes. The first one being this GIS clawback that's seeing many of these low-income seniors struggling to make ends meet because they're receiving a lower support amount than they were previously before the pandemic. Jagmeet Singh here is saying that they want a minor change made to make this clawback not actually happen, but likely that would be something that would have to be changed via legislation, not regulation. Remember the difference between legislation and regulation. Legislation, you have to work all the way through the House of Commons, through the Senate to make major changes to these bills that have previously been drafted to set up the GIS in the first place. When you make a change via regulation, and this is going to be important when we get to the CRB section of this video, when you make a change via regulation, well, that's something that's already baked into a bill. It's some flexibility that's already been pre-written. Now, in the situation with the CRB, as we'll get to here in a moment, inside of Bill C-30 gives the government the ability to extend the CRB without going back to the House of Commons to a maximum of November 20th. But we're going to get to that in just a minute. Let me show you here what Jagmeet has to say when he's asked directly about these pandemic supports, both the business supports and the CRB and supports for the individuals.
We've talked about how it's important to extend the help for people. We were the ones that fought back a number of times when CRB was being cut. We said, don't cut it. And they were going to discontinue supports for people. We said it's got to continue. That's another concrete thing that we could see. If they are interested in working with us, they could continue the support that people need, because we're still in a fourth wave. This fourth wave is the worst it's ever been for people in Alberta and Saskatchewan. So it is vital that the supports that are in place now continue. So they're kind of discussing and pondering whether to extend or not. We would say extend it. And if they extend it, that's another signal that they're they're showing to us that they're listening to what we've been calling for.
So the NDP, at the very least, are making their position clear. They want to see all of these pandemic benefits, both for businesses and both for individuals like the CRB, the CRCB, the CRSB. They want to see this extended, and then we'll see that as a sign that the Liberals are actually willing to work with them on their policy ideas moving forward. But here in this next clip, a reporter asks directly, hey, what do you think you can do to actually make this extension happen? Can you convince the Liberals to actually recall Parliament sooner so that you can get to debating a potential longer extension? Let me show you his response.
I did want to ask you about the emergency support. So we know that they're due to run up at the end of the month on the 23rd, specifically for businesses and individuals. The Liberals have been promising a narrow extension of benefits targeting businesses in the tourism sector, yesterday giving the signal that they're exploring options. I'm wondering, does the NDP support a targeted approach to only support hardest hit business sectors, or are you looking for broad business benefits for businesses and individuals to continue?
We want to see the supports continue. As I outlined, we're in the worst of it right now for Alberta and Saskatchewan. This is the worst it's ever been. So in the worst that it's ever been, it would be irresponsible and wrong to cut the help to people. So absolutely, we want to see a broad continuing of support. But the only tailoring of that support that we envision is that the support should go to people for sure and to small businesses. They've been the hardest hit, and we don't want to see support continue for the large corporations that have been able to get through this time with, in fact, doing really well. So we want to see a tailored approach to small businesses, but we want to see the wage subsidy and the rental subsidy continue for these small businesses, particularly given the impact of the fourth wave and how serious it's been and how there is a potential for things to get worse. So we want to see those supports continue. And that would be another sign that the Liberal government is interested in working with us, because they would be listening to our clear demand, which is to continue the supports for people and for small businesses.
So there's a lot to unpack here, and you'll see at the very beginning of this clip, the reporter asks, hey, the Liberals, they want to make very targeted supports for only certain sectors. Now, if you want some more context on this, we actually did a whole video on the press conference that the Liberals put out that give us a better idea of where their heads are at. So I'll link that video right here, and you can also check it out in the description. But as a quick summary, you again, watch it to get more context, but the Liberals made it very clear that they only want to target these individual sectors that have had a hard time recovering, making it a little bit unclear on whether or not they continue individual supports or just the business supports for these struggling sectors. Now, here Jagmeet Singh makes it entirely clear that he says, hey, we think that these small businesses should certainly be supported, but also individuals. During the fourth wave, we need to continue to support them. That's the NDP's stance, and they say that the only targeting that they want to see, the targeting that the Liberals continuously talk about over and over again, saying that they want to target again these individual sectors that are most hard hit. Jagmeet Singh says, hey, we're all for that targeting as long as that targeting is for small businesses over large businesses, something that the NDP largely campaigned on, saying that, hey, some companies have made record-breaking profits throughout the pandemic, and we don't want to see them continually supported by these wage subsidies when they may not necessarily need it. Instead, the NDP says, hey, we need to extend this for the small businesses and the personal support so that everyday Canadians can be the ones who are actually receiving the help.
I also have a question about the COVID benefits that can be rolled over for one more month before they expire. I'm wondering what kind of pressure your party plans to or can put on the government to recall Parliament quicker in order to extend these benefits.
Thank you for the question. My understanding is these benefits can be extended without Parliament being recalled. And so that's another reason why we're saying that would be a signal to us in terms of what would show a willingness for us to support legislation in the future, support a throne speech. I'm not worried that they haven't reached out. Earlier question was raised, have they reached out? And I said, no, I'm not worried about that, because we've laid out some of our concerns and our priorities, and the government can choose to work with those or not. One of those would be to continue the supports, and they can do that without recalling Parliament. So that would be another indication of their willingness to work with us. And it would signal seeing an extension of the supports for people and for workers and for small businesses would also go in the direction of securing our support for a potential throne speech. So we want to see these steps that we've outlined, these first steps that can be taken. And if any of them are moved on, it would be a positive signal.
Here, Jagmeet Singh emphasizes and tries to make it known to the public that these benefits could be extended until November 20th, I believe, without having to go back into the House of Commons. But this does make it a little bit less clear on whether or not the NDP would support a further extension past November, or whether or not they think this 1 month is enough for the continuation of these benefits. And one thing that you will have heard inside of that video that I think is not entirely known to most people is the mention of the throne speech, Now, if you haven't heard of a throne speech before, essentially what that is whenever there's an election or Parliament comes back into session after taking a break, the federal government, the leadership of the government at that time, will give a speech to identify what the government is actually going to focus on over the next little while. Now, this is a very important topic because when this throne speech is given, there is a vote on that throne speech in the House of Commons. And if that throne speech doesn't get enough support from the other parties when it's a minority government, it could potentially trigger another election. Now, I don't think that this is entirely likely because most of these parties need to refill the election coffers to run a campaign. So I think it's very unlikely that an election will actually happen. Likely this throne speech will be supported. But here in this video clip I've just shown you, Jagmeet Singh of the NDP is saying, hey, if you can extend these benefits before we're even in the House of Commons, at least until November 20th, well, that would be an indicator to us that you might get a little bit more support from the NDP when it comes time to vote on your throne speech that is set to happen right before Parliament kicks off, or as the thing that does kick off Parliament to be back in session. And just to summarize what's gone on here, this seems to be quite the pattern we're seeing whenever we get to the end of these pandemic benefits. We see the Liberals trying to make the decision on whether or not they should extend it or not based on employment information and how the pandemic's affecting different businesses. And they often sort of take a little while to make that decision. And then we see the NDP and some other parties come in and say, hey, we really need to extend these benefits to help these individual Canadians. The Liberals get pressured and then they opt to extend it. This is how things have traditionally gone, but there's no guarantee that that is how things will go this time. Something that may sound a little bit cynical, but I've seen it in multiple places. Multiple people have this thought that, hey, maybe the Liberals are waiting until the last possible minute to announce an extension to these benefits so that people feel the pressure and will go apply for jobs more proactively than perhaps they are right now. That's something that could be potentially on their minds, but I think likely over the next couple of weeks, we're going to get extreme clarity on what is going to happen when it comes to these extensions. So if you haven't already done so, make sure to subscribe to the channel. More videos like this are going to be coming to keep you up to date. And even when these pandemic benefits end, anything that could affect you as a Canadian, you and your money specifically, you're going to find out right here on the channel. So subscribe and let me know what you think of all of this down in the comments. I read every single comment and try to reply to as many as I possibly can. And of course, if you haven't done so yet, check out the links in the description to the Canada Money Mastery course, 40% off when you use coupon code GROW. And we talk all about building wealth right here in Canada so that you can take your financial future into your own hands. But with all of that said, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video has helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.